Okay, now let's look at factoring out a common factor. So when you have a common factor, what you want is the largest number they have in common, but actually the smallest exponent. So what I mean by that is, you're always going to go to your smallest number first. So this first example, we're going to go to our 6 and ask ourselves, will 6 divide into 12? And if the answer is yes, then 6 is that common factor. If it won't, I'll show you what to do on the next one. But for this one, it will. So we're going to take out the 6, and then we're going to look at our exponents, x3 and x2. We're going to take out the smallest of the exponents. So we're going to take out an x2. And then we're going to draw our parentheses, and to find out what goes inside, we're going to divide, So we're going to start with our original and start dividing by our common factor. So we're going to say 12 divided by 6 is 2, and x3 divided by x2 is x1, because when you divide exponents, you really subtract them. Then you've got a plus. 6 divided by 6 is 1. And x squared divided by x squared, 2 minus 2 leaves 0 x's. Just remember, when everything cancels out, you have to hold that place with a 1. And so that's your answer for common factor. Now let's look at this next one. Here we're going to go to the smaller number 12 and ask ourselves, will 12 go into 16? But it won't. So what you want is the largest number that'll divide into both of them. And if you know that it's 4, you can go ahead and use that. But let me explain to you why. If you look at 12 and at 16 and look at their factors. And what I mean by that is you can list the numbers and then decide what the factors would be by dividing. So 12 divided by 1 is 12. 12 divided by 2 is 6. 12 divided by 3 is 4. And then 12 divided by 4 is 3. So do you see those repeat? So we're done with our factors of 12. Then we can do the same thing with 16. 16 divided by 1 is 16. 16 divided by 2 is 8. 16 divided by 3 is a decimal. But 16 divided by 4 is 4. So you're looking at both of these. They both have a 2 in common, but you want the largest number that they both have in common, which for this one is a 4. And so that's one way of finding the largest factor, is by just looking at all the factors and picking the biggest one that they both have in common. So they both have a factor of 4, so we're going to pull a 4 out. Now, like I said, a lot of you can just look at them and know, and so you only need to do this over here if you can't figure out what the factor is just by looking at it. Okay, so we're going to take our factor of 4. Then we're going to look at our letters. We have an x4 and an x3, so you always want to take out the smallest amount of exponents, which is an x3. And then to get what goes inside the parentheses, we're going to divide. So 12 divided by 4 is 3. X to the 4 divided by x to the 3 is x1, because 4 minus 3 is 1. Then we have a plus. 16 divided by 4 is 4. x3 divided by x3 is 0 x's. So that's just our answer. So that's factoring out a common factor. Now you always want to check for a common factor, but if you notice, these bottom two don't have anything in common. So then we're going to ask ourselves, how many terms? And so for this one, we're going to be looking at when there's 4 terms, we're going to do what's called factor by grouping. And so what I mean by that is we're going to group the first 2, we're going to group the last 2, and we're going to bring that middle sign down. Now what you've got left is these now have a common factor. So you're going to look at the first parentheses. They don't have a number in common, so I can't take out a number, but they do both have an A. So I'm going to take out an A, and then to get what's left inside the parentheses, I'm going to divide. So a squared divided by a is a. The minus comes down. 2a divided by a is 2. So I factored the first parentheses. Now I'm going to look at the second parentheses. And what they both have in common is a b. They don't both have a number, so I can't take out a number, but they do both have a b, so I'm going to take out a b. And then I'm going to divide. ab divided by b is a. The minus comes down. 2b divided by b is 2. And now you should always come out with two sets of parentheses with what's alike in one and what's out front in the other. And so what I mean by that is, do you see that these came out to be the same? If they don't come out to be the same, you did something wrong or you have to rearrange them, but most of the time they'll come out the same. And so that's going to go in one parentheses. So what they have alike is the a minus 2. And then what's out front is what's left over when do you see when the a minus 2's are gone, you have left that a plus b. And that's your answer. And you can check yourself by multiplying it back out. A times a is a squared. A times b is ab. Negative 2 times a is negative 2a. And negative 2 times b is negative 2b. Okay, let's try another one. I'm going to group the first two, the last two, and bring that middle sign down. Now, anytime the middle sign is a negative, it's going to mess up this next sign, because when you factor a negative out of a parentheses, it's going to change the sign. So I'll explain that to you in a minute. But first, we're going to just look at this first part and take out the common factor. So I'm going to go to my smaller number 7 and ask, will 7 go into 14? Yes. So 7's my common factor. Then I might look at my letters. I have a Z2 and a Z1, so I'm going to take out the smaller amount, which is a Z1. Then I'm going to draw my parentheses and divide. So 7 divided by 7 cancels. Z2 divided by Z1 leaves me just a Z1. This plus comes down. 14 divided by 7 is 2, and the Z's cancel. Now my negative came down, and again, when there's a negative there, a plus isn't going to change any signs, but this negative is going to change this sign. And so we're going to look for our common factor here. They don't both have a number, they don't both have a Z, but they do both have an A. So I'm going to pull out an A. And when I go to divide, AZ divided by A is Z. But you see right here, a negative 2A divided by a negative A makes that a positive 2. So when that middle sign's negative, it's actually going to change that sign. But that's only when there's a negative. Then our answer is our two sets of parentheses with what they have alike is that Z plus 2. And what's out front is that 7Z minus A. And that's your answer. And again, remember to check it. Z times Z is 7Z squared. Z times negative A is negative AZ. 2 times 7Z is 14Z. And 2 times negative A is A. So that's factor by grouping.